China gets very little benefits from the economic benefits from relationship with Russia. China embraced communism, not because communism changed China. It does change China economically speaking. But I think politically speaking, ideologically speaking, China embraced communism because communism was similar to many of the Chinese traditions on autocracy, on authoritarianism. But in Russia, absolutely, right? If you kill many Ukrainians, if you kidnap Ukrainian children, you get promoted. That's meritocracy.
Dzień dobry, witam Państwa w wideopodcaście, pierwszym wideopodcaście Układu Sił, kwartalnika Układu Sił. Ruszamy z nową inicjatywą, w tym sensie z wideopodcastem, który będę prowadził ja. Nazywam się Kuba Benedyczak. Oczywiście ja w tym wszystkim będę najmniej ważny, ponieważ najważniejsi będą goście, których dzisiaj zapraszamy. A gość, który jest dzisiaj ze mną, kazał mi czekać na siebie bardzo długo, bo kiedy przeczytałem jego książkę pod tytułem Zmierzch Wschodu, Jak Chiny stały się potęgą i czy grozi im upadek, wiedziałem, że chcę z nim porozmawiać. Książka zresztą została przez magazyn Foreign Affairs wskazana jako książka roku, ale nie było to do tej pory w Warszawie, natomiast jest. Moim gościem jest profesor Yasheng Huang z Mid Sloan School of Management w Cambridge, Massachusetts, gdzie kieruje China Lab i India Lab. Hello, professor. It's honor to have here. I said before the moment that is great pleasure for me because you made me wait almost 1 year after I finished your book. I thought that I have to talk with you because it was so great that I really need to talk, but you haven't been to Warsaw so far, so I'm happy that you are here. Zanim zaczniemy, powiem tylko, że nasza rozmowa jest możliwa dzięki życzliwości hotelu Grand Sheraton w Warszawie, a teraz zaczynamy. Before we start talking about your book, I'd like to ask you about the current things, because this week the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit took place. It was followed by the military parade. And of course, all the media outlets, all the biggest magazines, the New York Times, the Guardian, the Washington Post, whatsoever, gave the clickbait title, China is ready for the war with the US. China has shown its military strength, etc., etc. Obviously, journalists, they need clickbait titles. You do not, I mean, you are scientists, so you do not clickbait titles, but in the broader context, the broader picture, also in the context of your book, how do you see at that summit and that military parade?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for hosting me in this conversation. I look forward to our conversations and discussions. I think the way that I look at the summit and also the parade is not so much from a foreign policy perspective, but really from a domestic political perspective. I think for leaders such as Putin, Xi Jinping, and other leaders in authoritarian countries, the most important thing about challenging the United States, challenging the West, is about maintaining political control of their own countries, of their own societies. So it is using the straw man, external threat, external enemy. So if you look at the military parade, it is about celebrating the end of the Second World War and victory over Japan. You know, you can think about problematic relationship between China and Japan today, but there's no way Japan poses any serious national security threat to China. It's not even. It's just bizarre, right? But the military parade still emphasizes and highlights the history of the Sino-Japanese War for mostly domestic political purposes. So the idea is that the state represented by the Communist Party, is the symbol of legitimacy and national unity, and therefore the state is entitled to the support and the loyalty from the citizens. So I see a lot of contradictions. And before the summit and the parade, there were negotiations and discussions between China and the United States to resolve the trade tensions, trade war between the two countries. And China, for example, in April, before the escalation of the trade war, what is known as Liberation Day, China didn't retaliate against the U.S. on an initial escalation of the trade war. And China has been quite restrained in terms of its rhetoric about the trade war with the United States, and China wants to reach a deal with the United States. So we see this kind of a split development, which is in terms of the speeches and in terms of the rhetoric, very anti-West, very anti-American. But in terms of the actual actions, it is not nearly as anti-Western as the speech and the rhetoric suggest. China just hosted a EU delegation, before the summit. So I see it that way.
Okay, but there's also a Russian element. I mean, it seemed that Xi Jinping stressed that Russia is one of the main allies here for China.
Yeah.
But of course, this is the official politics. I know that the leadership, I mean, communist leadership, not only Xi Jinping, but I'm talking about the lower level at the Communist Party, they do not look at Russia as a so attractive partner as the official politics would say. Am I right?
You're absolutely right about that. In terms of the economic relationship between Russia and China, it is nowhere near the level as compared with China's relationship with EU, with the United States, with Japan, with South Korea. China gets very little benefits from the economic benefits from relationship with Russia. And if you look at the number of the students who have gone abroad to study, very few of them choose to study in Russia. They will go to Europe, they will go to the United States, they will go to Japan. If you look at the children of high-level officials, where would they go? They don't go to Russia, right? Sure. So again, this is going back to the point I was making earlier. It is all about domestic politics and ideology. Russia represents authoritarian legitimacy and one-party system, strong control, and the regime values the relationship with Russia because Russia lends to the Communist Party this source of political and ideological legitimacy at the expense, I would argue, of the economic development, economic growth, and trade relationships. So we are seeing this divergence between the political benefits to the government and the economic benefits to the country.
Sure. So let's talk about your book. This is, in order to explain the roots and the formula of the Chinese state and Chinese autocracy, you used 4 elements. That is imperial examination, which is called, help me please with this.
Culture. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The second is autocracy, obviously, stability and technology. Why did you choose those 4 elements? Because I accept obviously the catchy title, the East, but I think that there were so many elements that you needed to pick up only 4.
Yeah, so I think to pick on autocracy, stability, and technology, that's not very surprising. These are really important characteristics and features of Chinese history and Chinese economy and society today. The issue is the first letter, E, the letter E, exam, right?
Yeah.
Why I pick that as a very important subject to study. So here's my view of Chinese history. And let me contrast that view with a standard view that many scholars have about China and the West. And that view is that the East and the West have always been different from each other. The West is represented by ancient Greek civilization, Roman Empire, and then later on, democracy, rule of law, beginning in England, in Great Britain, and then later on spreading to other parts of Europe. And China is a land of Confucianism and autocracy, strong ideological control, and a long-lasting political system that has defied democracy and economic growth, right? So that's a standard view in the minds of historians and social scientists. For example, Francis Fukuyama has written about this topic. Max Weber, right? So if we go back to the Western Enlightenment thinkers, Rousseau and Montesquieu, they all have this view. I came to a different view. My view is that if you look at the Western civilization, going back to ancient Greece, they were definitely democratic ideals and ideas, but they were also authoritarian ideals and ideas. Today, we think about nationalism, ultra nationalism as a form of authoritarianism. Nationalism was a Western invention. It was not invented by the Chinese. It was not invented by the Indians. It was a Western ideology. Marxism, which is an authoritarian idea, was invented by a Westerner, Marx, right? Karl Marx and Engels. And also, if you look at the ancient Chinese ideas, they were definitely, authoritarian ideas. But at one point in history, there was a lot of competition among different ideas. And it is not true that the Chinese civilization only had authoritarian ideas and only had this. Confucianism was actually one of the ideas. There were multiple ideologies competing with each other. So my question is, how come China settled on one idea, the idea of Confucianism, idea of authoritarian ideology?
Buddhism, you're also right about Buddhism, yeah?
Buddhism, yeah, sure. Taoism, Buddhism,
exactly.
Legalism. Yeah. There were multiple ideologies. And, I'm not saying that Buddhism was similar to liberalism. That's liberalism, first of all, emerged in the West much, much later. It's not as an organized school of thought, as an organized ideology. It happened much, much later. So my question is that why the West and the East, why they began with some similar tensions and competition among different ideas, and why the West ended up with liberalism, which is tolerant of different ideas. If you look at the West, look at your own country. In your country, you have liberalism, you also have conservatism, right? Yeah. If you look at England, if you look at Britain, Brexit and the economic free traders, within the EU, you have supporters of the EU, sort of supporters of globalization. You also have opponents of globalization. So I think the difference between the East and the West is not that in the West, one idea, the idea of democracy prevailed. And in the East, one idea, autocracy prevailed. the difference between the East and the West is that the West has multiple ideas, always competing with each other. Look at the United States today.
Sure.
Look at the difference between the Trump administration and the Biden administration.
Sure.
Look at how 7 months have made a difference, right? This is all within the same country, right? Yeah. Whereas the East, in this case China, arrive at one idea, right?
Yeah.
And the multiplicity disappeared. That's what I try to explain. And I focus on the exam system because the exam system is about ideas and things that are going on in your head.
Yeah.
It is not about battle, right? Yeah. I go battle with you. I win a victory over you. This is about something in your head, Yeah. So what was the technology that could get into your head? That was exam. And China invented that system long before the Western civilization. So that's how I settle on that letter E.
Yeah, but because, very often the Western countries, Western people look at the exam as something exceptional, something very good, at some fundamentals of the new system of education, etc.
Yeah.
But you write that in some way it stopped, for example, technological innovation. Am I right?
Yeah.
It's not only one direction. It's so fabulous and incredible, but it also has some minus, very important in the historical development.
Yeah. So if we think about these words, exam, which is examination, short for examination.
Yes.
And the test. See, this is the difference between exam and the test. Sometimes we use them interchangeably. We say they are the same thing. Yeah. The test is a very specific, specific mechanism, right? I test your vocabulary. In the United States, the high school students take SAT. What does SAT stand for? It stands for Standard Aptitude Test. Strictly speaking, it's not an exam, right? LSAT, which is about the legal knowledge, it's a test. Test is a specialized testing device. I test your math, I test your chemistry, your knowledge of chemistry, I test your knowledge of Polish language, Chinese language, English language. Exam and examination is a broader concept. We say we do a examination of the country's political system, economic system. It's a comprehensive evaluation of something rather than a specific evaluation. So in the case of the keju, which is the Chinese word for civil service exam, it is not about testing a particular skill. It is testing, first of all, your command of classical ideology, classical text, Confucianism, only one ideology, Confucianism. It is also testing and examining your loyalty to the emperor. So the examination system that Chinese invented in the 6th century is a comprehensive mechanism to definitely test your specific skills, your ability to memorize, but also it is a way for the emperor to tell whether or not you are a loyal supporter of the emperor or not. So it is much more broad and much more comprehensive than the kind of the test that we think of in modern societies.
Yeah, but I think I was also suspicious about this mythology of meritocracy, even if it's a meritocracy, but that there was a mythology of meritocracy, infallibility, and the ability of prediction for the next 100 years, 200 years for Chinese.
Yeah.
Like for the Russians, they're great chess player. I mean, Russian politicians are great chess players, which is not, from my point of view, it's not true. I mean, it's not possible. Even if you have a meritocratic system, you're not able to answer adequately for the challenges for the next 100 years, 200 years, even if you have that well-working, well-functioning system.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you, but on the other hand, no system that we know of can safely give you answers about what's going to happen in the next 100 years.
But this is Chinese brand mark. I mean, this is that True. We are able to predict.
Yes. No, that's right. It's a total nonsense. And the people who believe that the Chinese system is superior argue that because of meritocracy they can see the future 100 years, and it's that's just not true. Yeah. And also, how do you know that they can see things 100 years later? Because I don't think I can live for 100 years. There's no way for me to say whether or not that prediction is correct. So, but the thing is, I think there are many ways to criticize meritocracy. But I think it's not wrong to emphasize capabilities in the government. It is not wrong to emphasize analytical, technical capabilities in the government. But the problem with meritocracy is that it is completely silent on a more important issue in my mind, which is how the political process is going to affect and very often distort the technocratic process. Right? So, let's just take an obvious example of setting interest rates. You don't want politicians to have the power to set the interest rates. So that's why you create independence between the political process and the technocratic process. Meritocracy has absolutely nothing to say about that separation, because the meritocratic argument is that as long as you're good at performing certain tasks, you get promoted, right? But it doesn't say anything about how the technocratic process can be distorted by the political process. So we need to create separation between the politics and the bureaucratic decision-making. And you can achieve that in a democracy. You don't need an autocracy to achieve that. A lot of people who advocate meritocracy are actually advocating autocracy. That is their argument for autocracy rather than meritocracy. So, and the other problem with the meritocracy is that what is the merit? How do you define merit? This is an intrinsically subjective judgment. Again, that argument doesn't resolve the problem of the political effect on how you define the merit. I gave the example in my book. In 1950s, Mao Zedong defined the merit as how loyal you are to him. And 1960s, during the Cultural Revolution, that was so. If you're loyal to him, that's a merit, and you get promoted. And then Deng Xiaoping defined the merit as promoting economic growth. Definitely, I like Deng Xiaoping's definition than Mao's definition. But who is going to say that one merit is correct and the other merit is not correct, right? So the meritocracy doesn't say anything about what that merit is. Right? That merit can be about invading another country, and you get promoted. Is that necessarily a good merit in a normal country, in a country that values and peace and stability. No, it's not a good merit. It's a very bad merit, but you still get promoted.
Yeah.
By that definition, it qualifies as a meritocracy.
In Russia, it is a merit.
In Russia, absolutely, right? If you kill many Ukrainians, if you kidnap Ukrainian children, you get promoted. That's meritocracy, right? Yeah. So I don't buy that argument at all.
You also blame a little bit Confucianism for the blocking risk-taking and some innovative area. And I'm asking about that not only in the historical context, but as I understand, the Communist Party very strongly refers at the moment to Confucianism and these ideas.
So let me clarify. I don't blame Confucianism itself on
But for the monopoly, as I understand.
Yeah. So I think there's a difference, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So it is the monopoly of Confucianism blocking other ideas. That was the problem with technological progress in the Chinese history. So in my way of thinking, I don't mind Confucianism or Buddhism or Taoism or any other ism or conservatism or nationalism, as long as there's competition, as long as you have free market of ideas, as long as different ideas fight with each other. The invention of the Keju system, the civil service exam system, was the most important reason that the diversity of ideas disappeared. And it led to the monopoly of one idea, Confucianism. And it happened to be Confucianism, but if it was a different ideology, if it's just one, say it's Buddhism or Taoism, it will probably still have the same effect on technology. So let me come to China today. So China, nominally speaking, is a communist country, like Poland before 1989. That's true. But it is also true that since 1978, China has opened its economy to the rest of the world ahead of the fall of communism, ahead of the collapse of the Berlin Wall, because China began to do this in 1978. One of the things I didn't quite know before, and when I was doing this research, I found out, China began to open its university system to the West even before China reestablished its diplomatic relationship with the United States, even before its economic opening. So they have been many scientific collaborations, commercial collaborations between Chinese researchers and Chinese companies with European researchers, with American researchers. And in terms of financial sector, many of the high-tech companies were supported by Silicon Valley high-tech venture capital firms, by SoftBank, which is a Japanese venture capital firm, by companies based in Europe. For example, one of the biggest social media companies in China today is called Tencent. They have WeChat and they have computer games. It was the early investor was a South African media company. So globalization played a key role in the takeoff of the Chinese technology. If you look at the biotech sector, many of these biotech entrepreneurs were educated in the United States or backed by venture capital firms in the United States, right? And they collaborated with Western pharmaceutical companies, with Western biotech companies. So essentially, even though politically, China is a one-party system, economically, you have tremendous amount of diversity. You have tremendous amount of competition.
Yeah.
And the ideas, the flow of the ideas. So it is hard for me to argue that the successes that China has achieved today are a result of one-party system when you don't look at these other things, which are much more immediate to the economic development and technological development.
Oh, yeah.
So look at the AI, artificial intelligence development in China. DeepSeek, which emerged out of China.
Yeah.
They rely on the open source model, Llama model developed by Meta, and they train their algorithm on the chips supplied by NVIDIA, which is an American company. For years and years, Huawei, the telecom company in China, used the chips from TSMC, the Taiwanese company. They collaborated with a German company on their camera technology. They have many, many components made by Japanese companies, Korean companies. The Chinese success, like success everywhere else, including the United States, is a result of collaboration. It's not a result of one-party control. There are many, many one-party countries in the world without technological successes.
But in one of the interview, you said that it's put in danger at the moment. I mean, the trust in the supply chain, the trust from the foreign partners is going put into danger for China. So because the role of the party, the role of the state, etc.
Yeah, so I think it's important for your viewers to have this perspective correctly, which is that the true crackdown on supply chain, on foreign companies operating in China, that happened extremely recently. It first began to happen around the time of COVID. If you look at foreign direct investment into China before COVID, it was still, not at as high as before, but was still at pretty high level. COVID, 2020, 2021, 2022, fundamentally changed the business landscape in China.
Yeah.
And also the weaponization of the Chinese supply chain.
Over control.
That over control. So the extreme over control. I think some of that already began to happen around 2015, 2016, 2017. But the intensification of these controls really happened in the last 5 years. And the deterioration of relationship with the United States, with the EU, it's even later. I think with the EU, mostly after Russia invaded Ukraine. With the United States, it happened during the first Trump administration, specifically in 2018, when Trump began the trade war against China in 2018. So this is a relatively recent phenomenon. But then if you look at the technological achievements that China has made, biotech, AI, and robotic production, those happen over a long period of time. And I think if the trade war persists, if tensions with the West persist for another 5 and 10 years, I do worry about the economic and technological developments in China without collaborations. So the chip control over China, you need the advanced chips to train the algorithm. Now there's a lot of evidence to show that the Chinese companies were able to get the most advanced chips from NVIDIA, from other Western American companies, even during the height of the export controls, and they were using those chips to train their algorithm. So essentially, even under the most recent period of tensions between China and the West, there were still a lot of kind of collaborations under the radar between Chinese companies and American companies.
Wow, I understand. So I think it's a good moment to move to the political system, because in other interviews, you made a difference between two kinds of stability, which I really like, because you said that there is a difference between the stability in the context of transferring the power from one leader to the next leader, and the stabilization of the system. In the first context, China is not stable at all. I mean, at least very often it's not stable. In the second context, it is stable, or even strongly stable.
Yeah. So I think, as you know, as a Polish citizen coming from the history of a communist countries and authoritarian countries as a whole have a problem of peaceful transition of power from one person to another. Soviet Union had that problem. I'm not as familiar with Polish history. I don't know if you had a martial law, right?
There were some tensions, obviously, within the communist elites.
Yeah. So you had martial law in the 1980s, solidarity movement. In many countries, you have this authoritarian countries. You have this power transition instability, and then there are some interesting differences of how these authoritarian countries have handled these problems. On one extreme is North Korea.
It is extreme. And Turkmenistan is
so far it has been very stable, right? So they have no problem transitioning from one leader to another, but then they rely on genetics, right? So basically, it's an imperial system. The imperial system is actually very stable in terms of making that transition, because nobody is going to challenge the legitimacy of the
Kim family. Sorry for interrupting you, but in China this week, Kim Jong-un came with his daughter.
Yeah, I know.
Obvious that she's got someone important,
And he knows exactly how important it is to lay the groundwork for that eventual transition. He is a young person. He's in his maybe late 30s. And maybe he's now healthy, but he's a young person. His daughter is only 12 years old, and he is already thinking about the power transition from him to his daughter.
Exactly. So, but Lukashenko did the same with his son. When his son was 10 years old, he take him to every trip to other countries.
Yeah. So I think if the political elites accept the genetic transition of power, then it's actually stable, right? The thing I worry about North Korea is that it is a daughter rather than a son. That may present some unique problems, right? And also, that will be the fourth generation, and they may not have the kind of charisma and legitimacy to carry on for 4 generations in a row. So that's one pattern. So that's stable. And the other pattern is in Latin America. They have autocracy, authoritarian system. And so they also have some problems with power transition. But by and large, they're stable. They're stable because they have term limit. The president can only serve one term. And that term limit also gave them stability. another pattern, if you look at Libya, countries like that, when you make transition from one person to another, the whole system collapsed. So China is the fourth pattern, the pattern you described, which is that the country had a lot of problems making transition from one leader to another, right? For example, after Mao died in 1976, they transitioned to a leader, and that leader went out of the power 4 years later. And then after that, there have been, number of transition problems. But the system persisted. So the problems with the power transition from one leader to another didn't affect the stability of the system. So I try to explain why. And then I go back to the Keju system as well, right? So the Keju system is not just about ideology of the elites. It is also about how the citizens, the general citizens, the general public process information, process these issues. And the Keju system was extremely successful in developing this idea, which is that you always take the government first. Government is more important than you. I mean, to people living in a democracy, it is an outrageous idea, right? So how can you say that government is more important than the citizens? But that's a very prevailing idea in China. And that idea was promoted by the exam system. Generations and the generations of people were taking exams on that idea, right? So essentially, you start with the idea that the government is legitimate. Everything that government does is correct. If there's something wrong, it must be my fault. So that gives the system incredible amount of the stability. So let me give you an example to illustrate this phenomenon. And your Polish viewers will probably find it very interesting illustration, which is that in Chinese character, the word country has two characters. The first character, 国, means government, the state. The second character means 家, means household. So basically, country literally is state, household. The state comes first. The household comes second. It is an amazing idea. It is a remarkable idea that there are people who believe that the government comes before the household. If you go back to human history, human history had human beings first, hunter and gathering society, and then they began to form a government, right? So this is a famous idea of social contract.
It is, yeah.
Because the nature is chaotic, anarchic, and violent, then people got together and formed the government, and they gave up certain natural rights in exchange for protection. So people come first, and then government comes second. So that's the basic idea of democracy. Government is there to protect the people, rather than people are there to protect the government. But in the Chinese political culture, it is a prevailing idea that the people are there to protect the government because government comes first. And that came from that Keju system. So
it's so similar to the Stalinism, but there was no government, but it was the party, obviously.
Okay. So in the contemporary era, it is the Communist Party. In the ancient times, it was the emperor. It was the imperial system. So who represents the government has changed. But that notion that the state, the government, comes before the people has not changed. definitely there's a similarity. And that's why I think China embraced communism, not because communism changed China. It does change China economically speaking. But I think politically speaking, ideologically speaking, China embraced communism because communism was similar to many of the Chinese traditions on autocracy and on authoritarianism. The thing that communism changed China is really about economy, the central planning. That part China didn't have before. So now I go back to this stability of the system. When majority of the people have that view that the government comes before the people, they don't question these aspects of the system. If they see a power struggle, if they see difficulties of power transition, they don't immediately think, oh, there's something wrong. And they will just accept that, right? So they may believe that, okay, the leader is bad, but once we have a good leader, things will
be better,
will be better, right? Well, that to some extent it has happened, right? So Mao died, and the person who succeeded Mao was still in Maoist, but I think he was better than Mao. At least he didn't start Cultural Revolution. And Deng Xiaoping then replaced him, and Deng was much better than the immediate successors of Mao because Deng opened China to the world, opened Chinese economy, and to a lesser extent also opened China's politics, right? Much better than the previous leader. And most of the Chinese public and even some Chinese intellectuals will say, oh, it worked. The key is to have a good leader. Whereas if you think about the Western way of thinking about these issues, that thinking says we got to devise a system to prevent a Mao rather than thinking about the system to make sure that Deng Xiaoping rather than Mao is the leader, right? So I'm not saying the Western system doesn't think about the good leader, but the Western system is much more about how to prevent a bad leader than it is about how to choose a good leader.
Good leader, yeah. And that's why the Chinese system or even China as a state is destined to the tallow curve. You wrote a lot about it.
Yeah. Sorry, say it again.
That's why it's destined to the tallow curve. You wrote about it because of the things you said. Because it's like a closed circle.
It's a loop, right?
It's
a closed circle. So that gives the system a lot of stability. Although that said, today's China is fundamentally different from China before 1978, China in 19th century, 18th century, 17th century. And one big difference is the economy. China is a globalized economy. And many Chinese, like myself, right? I was born in China, but I went to study in the United States. Many Chinese have acquired education abroad, and many business people have traveled abroad, and many intellectuals have been exposed to Western ideas about rights, about rule of law, about contracts, about political stability that you get by having the government serving the people rather than the other way around, rather than by oppression and repression. So that's one big difference. And the other big difference is that since 1978, Chinese people have been used to rapid economic growth, continuous improvements of their living standard. Now the economy is in high level of distress, I would argue.
Mm-hmm.
The income improvements have slowed down and even probably have gone into reverse. So I think the issue here is that traditional acceptance of the government, whether or not that is going to be still strong enough
Mm-hmm.
to overcome the dissatisfaction that may emerge from income slowdown, economic slowdown, and potential economic and social dislocations. So I think there's a more question mark now whether the system is going to maintain itself as intact as before. I'm not saying, it's going to be troubled and all of that, but I do believe there's more question about that issue than before.
So the last question, because we are totally run of time,
Okay.
but I really would like to ask about it. So where we should look for the person who would replace Xi Jinping, in what areas? Because in Russia, it's obvious. You need to look at FSB, army, etc. Where to look in China? If you can shortly, because they will kill me.
I don't know.
Oh,
I mean, seriously. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So this is the aspect of Chinese system that is least transparent. I really don't know.
Okay.
And I think before Xi Jinping, we had some ideas about potential contenders, but these days, this is just something that nobody knows.
Okay. So thank you, Professor Huang.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
To był pierwszy odcinek w tym cyklu. Tak sobie myślę, że przy okazji kolejnej rozmowy w Chinach zbierzemy jakąś porcję memów albo przysłów chińskich z tymi wszystkimi żabami, smokami i tak dalej. Zresztą ta rozmowa odbywa się dzięki życzliwości hotelu Sheraton w Warszawie. Dostaliśmy pokój azjatycki, tak się nazywa. Obok jest nawet kuchnia i ja czuję zapachy azjatyckiego jedzenia. Także mam nadzieję, że do następnego razu. Przypomnę, że naszym gościem dzisiaj był Yasheng Huang, autor książki Zmierzch Wschodu, Jak Chiny stały się potęgą i czy grozi im upadek. To był wideo podcast Układu Sił. Ja nazywam się Kuba Benedyczak. Do zobaczenia.